Good morning and welcome to another one of Drew's book reviews. So today's review is going to be on a book titled The Dragon's Path. This is the first book in the Dagger and Coin series by Daniel Abraham. Now this is the first Daniel Abraham book I've ever read, but I'd heard so many good things about Daniel Abraham, and particularly this series, that I thought definitely worth buying and picking up. And I have to say that I am not disappointed in my choice. It was definitely a read that I really enjoyed, and I'm really looking forward to reading the next set of books within this series. So I'll just give a little bit of information about what this book is about. So Daniel Abraham has created this world that the mythology behind it is that the world was created by these dragons, which are basically dragon lords. They created the races, and mankind has been divided up into 13 different races of humanity. Now, the 13 races actually started with what's referred to as the race of the first blood. So this is a race that is near bestial form, feral bestial form of humanity, from which all the other 12 crafted races have formed or were formed by the dragons. So the first blood is what all other species of humanity were essentially based off, with all the other races being these craft races, or I guess custom-made, custom-built, and designed races by the dragons back in the age of dragons. So we have what's called the Eastern Triad of races. So these include the Jazru, the Yemu, and the Trelgu races. So the Jazru are approximately the same size as the first blood races, but unlike them, the Jazru actually have these metallic scales, which are of the scales of the lesser dragons. So they kind of have the skin that's like a metallic scale shape to it, while being roughly the same size as the first blood humans. Then we have the Yamu, which are effectively a increased monster size race with these huge tusks that come out of their mouth and their jaws. Kind of like, you can imagine a tusk from like a mastodon type thing just coming out of the side, these massive tusks coming out of their face in rather large size. Now this does come at a cost, so while they are essentially believed to have been designed or crafted for the sole purpose of intimidation of the lesser races, it comes at the cost of a really short lifespan because of their large size. So there's a bit of a trade-off there when it comes to being a Yemu. Then the Trelgu have a tall disposition, so they're a much taller race, but they also have a very keen hearing as one of their features, and fierce teeth. So they're kind of really built and designed with the idea behind being a carnivore, with very sharp teeth and keen hearing being the key features that distinguish them from the other races. So after the Eastern Triad, we have what's called the Western Triad of races. So the Western Triad includes the races of the Sine, Dartine, and Timsine races. Well, the Sine, they are basically these tall, thin, pale race with a marked talent in the mental arts, which is their key distinguishing feature. While the Dartine seem to be a race that's specifically built and designed for the purpose of mining. They have these luminescent eyes and a structure like any other race that allows them to navigate in complete darkness. So it's thought that they were created for the purpose of mining underneath the Earth's surface, being able to navigate through an environment that has virtually no light whatsoever. And it is rumored that they've actually built these underground cities and fortresses under the earth, and this vast industrial mining complex and fortresses and kingdoms underneath the surface of the earth. So a really interesting theory behind that, though it's never actually been proven. Nobody knows if these mysterious underground cities and civilizations actually exist with this race. Now the Timsine, being the third of the Western Triad. Now this is an interesting species. Here they have these dark insectile type scales that, while the scales themselves don't actually offer much in the way of protection, it's a very unique distinguishing feature. But here's the thing, these scales are literally capable of encapsulating all the flesh on their body, covering every orifice and hole, so your ears, your eyes, your mouth, your nose, everything, and including obscuring everything. Nobody really knows what their purpose was or why they were designed that way, but it's a really unique feature. I mean, each one of these races themselves certainly has a unique feature behind them. So the next is what is termed the master races. So the Kurtadam are a race that were gifted a full pelt of warming hair, and gifted with the arts of beading and adornments that represent the highest in etiquette and personal beauty of all the races. So they're really there, I guess you could say that their function is simply to sit there and look pretty, and be good looking, which is aesthetic appeal essentially. And of course being able to stay warm because they have a full body of hair covering their entire body. Now the Honadam race is a race that has a thick mineral layer within their skin, which actually has the effect of repelling violence. And also a very intelligent race, superior intellect, that's enabled them to have complete dominance over their part of the world that they're in. And then the Rajtam would be the final race in this category. And they are a smaller race of people, but they're the only race that has actually been gifted by the dragons with the gift of flight. And then finally we have the Decadent Races, which are their final category here. They are a large race of people, primarily living in the north and cold climates. They have this ability to stay warm due to the excessive fat content of their bodies, making them a rather larger species. But at the same time, they're also a species that tends to have a violent, uncontrolled temper, more like that of a wild animal without a master. The Selflings, being the next of the Decadent Races, they have basically built up this culture of kind of like termites or an anthill type culture where, while they're certainly capable of sexually reproducing in the normal way, they prefer to have the reproduction done through like a hive queen, with all their sub-members of the species, aside from the queen, being nothing more than these drones under the queen's rule. So they're more like a half-human species, but also, in addition to having this hive queen drone mentality, they also are a kind of nomadic tribal people as well. And then we have the Drowned, which is the final of the Decadent Races and of the created races by the dragons. The Drowned basically is a race of humans that lives in the water and under the ocean and lakes, rivers. They tend to congregate near tide pools and are often viewed as nothing more than human seaweed, and really more of a pain in the butt and just something not worth spending time on. So that basically summarizes the 13 races that have been set out in this series. So hopefully I have more to say about each of these races as the series moves on. But to move on, we just want to cover a little bit about this story and the respective characters within this book. So first we have Marcus. He is a mercenary that really is tired of war. He doesn't like war. He hates it. He feels that he's done with it and can't deal with it anymore. And he knows that if he does not have any kind of mercenary contract, that he will be conscripted into the king's army in war, which he doesn't want to be a part of. So he takes up this contract to protect a convoy. And under the current laws of the land, he cannot be conscripted into the army if he has an active contract. So he's constantly trying to ensure that he always has an active contract, just as a guard for whoever. He doesn't care who. It's not about that. It's about keeping him out of the military conflict and out of the army. And that's what he does. So within this story, he ends up hiring a troupe of actors to pretend to be guards with him, so it looks like he's on a legitimate duty to guard a convoy that is leaving the city of Vinay. And then we have Sifrin, who is basically raised by the banks. She is an orphan and was the ward of the Medine Bank in Vinay before all hell broke loose in Vinay, and she had to flee with a convoy while smuggling the bank's wealth, the same convoy that Marcus happens to have taken up guarding. So she just tries to disguise herself as a boy named Tag instead of as Sifrin, the ward of the bank, being the only one left and the only one to escape the chaos. And then we have Getter. He is a son of nobility, Getter Palianko, and he is pretty much a worthless excuse for a soldier. He is friends in the army. He has no friends in the army. He's the constant butt of jokes. He's constantly harassed and bullied. Nobody likes him, and he just hates his life. And he's more interested in philosophy and speculative essay and historical documents than he is about actual war and being a soldier. As part of a political move, he is put in charge of the city of Vinay by the nobles of the kingdom in an effort to cause Vinay to basically fall due to his incompetence and inability to rule, because he has no skill set in this. He doesn't have the leadership ability. He doesn't have a soldier's ability. He's just really not really that skilled or care much about it. So he was basically set up to fall. And that's kind of his storyline and what happens with him. And then we have Dawson, who is the advisor to the king, who is trying to get the king to take action where necessary to prevent war, rather than just sitting on the sidelines and just trying to be a neutral party while his nobles and the leaders in the kingdom are basically at each other's throats. So that's a really interesting perspective there. And then we have this priest or servant of the servant, essentially, or the spider god, as I suspect it will turn out to be based on the titles of later books. So this priest's name is Basrahib, who Getter meets at this temple in a part of the world that's essentially been long forgotten after he's essentially exiled there, which his whole exile in and of itself is interesting. Now, the thing that kind of takes you by surprise with this character Getter is just the actions that he takes seems to come out of nowhere. So it really came as a surprise when he was put in charge of the city of Vinay. One thing that really stands out about him is, in retaliation for learning he had been set up to fail, he essentially burns the city and all of its inhabitants to the ground and completely destroys it. He almost seems like he's a sociopath who has absolutely no fear about basically killing tens of thousands of innocent people just to prove a point. And while the storyline is put out that he was initially praised for his actions, he was essentially exiled at the same time while being politically manipulated by the elite of the land. So this is a really interesting storyline. I'm really looking forward to getting more into it in future books, and I think the character Getter is definitely one that's going to have a very interesting storyline. Not so much. And we're interested to see how Sifrin plays out as well, but Getter really is the one character that I think is really going to be one of my favorite characters, just because the storyline behind him and how he gets to where he is, I mean, what he's turning into. And with Basrahib, his priest, who has the ability to tell when somebody is lying, he could sense the lies. He is now being helped by Basrahib to basically put a foothold and control over the kingdom. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that storyline plays out and how it ends up going in the end. And that's going to be awesome. One other point I wanted to cover with this review is, one thing that I really like about this is there's this ongoing theme throughout the book of this conflict between the religious skeptic and religion, and those who believe and those who are skeptical of that belief. In fact, it starts out with a chapter simply titled The Apostate, and how this character is running for his life from the religious who are out to kill and slaughter him for abandoning his faith. And he no longer believes. He's now a skeptic of this, and he's running for his life. And at the end, when we see a bit of a recap of this character, the Apostate, we learn who the Apostate is, and you'll be surprised which character he actually is. At least, well, I guess maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but I'm not surprised that we're actually dealing with this character throughout the whole book without really realizing he was, in fact, the Apostate. That being said, I mean, there are definitely some hints within the book about this character and which one was possibly the apostate, but nothing that clearly pointed that out until the final ending chapter of the book, in which case we learn who the apostate is for sure and where he ended up. So this is just overall, I am absolutely loving Daniel Abraham. This is just a fantastic read, and I really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. So definitely pick it up, check it out, because this was a good book. I really enjoyed it, and I am really looking forward to reading The King's Blood and giving you my review on this one, Book 2 of the Dagger and Coin. So if you have not picked up Daniel Abraham, now's the time to do it. Like, this is just a great read, really enjoyable. Again, thank you so much for watching. And as always, I'll put links to my Twitter feed and Facebook feed in the section below, in the description below. And don't forget to comment, share, like, subscribe. Again, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Drew's Book Reviews. Look forward to the next review, and we will see you then. Thank you so much.